Let's talk about slavery. This is Fredrick Douglass. He was born in Cordova, Maryland, at some time on some day. He does not know when. As he says, I know as much of my birth as does a horse. This is Donald Glover, also known as Childish Gambino. He was born... Wait a minute, where was he born? An Air Force base? All jokes aside, Donald Glover and Fredrick Douglass both attempt to accomplish something similar, despite having different forms of media. Fredrick Douglass attempts to persuade a predominantly white audience to abolish slavery in the South, using more illustrative techniques. Donald Glover, still trying to persuade a mainly white audience, tries to get them to acknowledge and then abolish the current slavery system of the modern day. If Donald Glover is to be believed, which I think he is, slavery has never been abolished, but rather transformed. This would mean that Donald Glover and Fredrick Douglass are attempting to do the same thing. Let's look at it. As discussed previously, this is Fredrick Douglass. On May 1st of 1845, he published his book, A Narrative Life of guess who? Fredrick Douglass. This is an absolute banger of a book. I will be focusing on primarily chapter 10 for this analysis. On page 44, Fredrick Douglass describes what are known as Christmas parties. Quote, the days between Christmas and New Year's Day are allowed as holidays, and accordingly, we were not required to perform any labor more than to feed and take care of our stock. A slave who worked during the holidays was considered by our masters as scarcely deserving them. He had disgrace not to get drunk at Christmas, and he was regarded as lazy indeed, who had not provided himself with the necessary means during the year to get enough whiskey to last him through Christmas. From what I know of the effect of these holidays upon the slave, I believe them to be among the most effective means in the hands of the slaveholder in keeping down the spirit of insurrection. Were the slaveholders at once to abandon this practice, I have not the slightest doubt it would lead to an immediate insurrection among the slaves. These holidays serve as conductors or safety valves to carry off the rebellious spirit of enslaved humanity. Here, Douglass describes the one tiny bit of freedom that the slaves were permitted. However, he then goes on to talk about how this freedom was used to manipulate and control, pushing the slaves into contentment of their confinement. Quote, their objective seems to be to disgust their slaves with freedom by plunging them into the lower depths of dissipation. For instance, the slaveholder not only like to see the slave drink of his own accord, but will adopt various plans to make him drunk. One plan is to make bets on their slaves, as to see who can drink the most whiskey without getting drunk. And in this way, they succeed in getting multitudes to drink to excess. Thus, when the slave asks for virtuous freedom, the cunning slaveholder, knowing this ignorance, cheats him with a dose of vicious dissipation artfully labeled with the name of liberty. This is a perfect example of what is called satiation. Giving someone too much of something until they're sick of it. In this section, Douglass describes how masters would manipulate slaves into wanting to stay in slavery, or be hesitant to leave, further pushing them back into the system that oppresses them. We can draw from this that Douglass is, of course, anti-slavery, but his examples perfectly parallel the depictions that Donald Glover gives us. Let's take a look. Atlanta. Premiered September 6th, 2016. A masterpiece by Donald Glover. but I will be focusing on specifically Season 1, Episode 9, known as Juneteenth. We can see that Fredrick Douglass attempts to describe slavery. He gives a framework of what it is, and then he further goes on to say that we should abolish it. Donald Glover, similarly, seems to attempt to show that slavery is still there, using subtle depictions. Let's look. Episode 9 opens with our main character, Ern, in a bed. He gets up, gets dressed, goes out to go meet his ex-girlfriend, Van, in a car. They drive to a large house where we meet a wealthy black woman who is hosting a party for Juneteenth. This party goes interesting as the two, Ern and Van, become more and more uncomfortable with Craig, the wealthy black woman's husband. Eventually, Craig mentions a shooting that Ern was involved in, and they storm out. Let's take a look at Craig first.
Nobody can give you freedom. Nobody can give you equality or justice or anything. If you're a man, you take it. Malcolm X quote that inspired that painting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean...
Stop. You're fine. You want a real drink?
Sure.
All right.
That's a interesting interpretation of that quote.
Well, it's the only interpretation. It accurately depicts the plight of the contemporary black man. That is why I painted it.
Wow.
Okay, so obviously this guy's creepy as hell, and it only gets worse. There's so much going on in this gallery that I could talk for hours, but let's focus primarily on that painting. I'm going to assume here that Craig does not understand what he's doing, because I feel that it's important to Donald Glover's message. I don't believe that Craig doesn't mean well, but he is, of course, being extremely racist. The idea of depicting someone in his way, it's appropriation. Not only does his little black shrine look like the British Museum, but it also has depictions of black people how he sees it, and he believes that it's the only way to see it. This is different from Fredrick Douglass, as Fredrick Douglass primarily focuses on the torment and theft of slavery, but I feel that this is a pretty important thing along with it. It is not only an example of how some white people who may mean well don't understand what they're doing, but also shows us how these stereotypes further push black people down. Craig, I believe, is meant to symbolize a master in this scenario, even whether he knows it or not. That brings us to our next clip.
So, Ern, what kind of business you in?
Music management.
Yes.
Yes?
No, it's nice. A brother on the business side of music.
What do you mean?
Please. Well, music is such an integral part of the African-American culture. It's expression. And it's been stripped from you. Black music artists are products for white American consumption and appropriation.
Is this Hennessy?
Mm-hmm.
Are you an archaeologist in African studies?
I'm an optometrist.
I see a picture of you in Africa over there.
Oh, that was a pilgrimage. Needed to pay my respects, ask for forgiveness. Well, you know, right?
I don't. I really don't.
Wait, you've never been to Africa?
No.
You gotta go. Man, it's your motherland. What are you thinking? Missing out? What are you?
Huh? What?
Where are your ancestors from? Congo? Ivory Coast? Southeastern Bantu region.
I don't know. This spooky thing called slavery happened, and my entire ethnic identity was erased. So.
Exactly.
While there are a million different reasons why this is horrible, I feel like the main one to highlight is that he's telling him how he should live, how he should exist. This is very similar to what Douglass describes involving the Christmas parties for masters. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, he winds up doing a form of what the slave masters would do when they would make slaves get extremely drunk or give them too much food, in which he is telling him how to celebrate, which further marginalizes him. In Douglass's words, it is the master's artfully wrapped liberty, a Trojan horse. Moving away from Craig, we get to the other parts of the party, smaller details, minor details, that resemble the Christmas celebration from long ago. These include the bar, which has some interestingly named drinks as we see. The singing, which Douglass in previous chapters talks about how it was misread as joyous. Slaves would normally sing the loudest when they were in the most pain. And even the name of the episode itself, Juneteenth. What I believe Donald Glover is trying to argue here is that Juneteenth is a release valve, but it is the new version of the Christmas party. Yet again, I believe a strong argument can be made that him and Fredrick Douglass are no different. They're the same person, arguing for a similar thing, just at different times. We know from other episodes that Donald Glover sees slavery as a current problem. Throughout the entire show, we see references, allusions, and even downright statements saying that slavery is a modern day thing. I believe that this Juneteenth party is just another way of depicting that. We can, of course, say that Fredrick Douglass literally went through slavery. There's no other way to put it. However, I believe that Donald Glover is using his symbolic techniques to reference previous slavery, as I've just shown. The Christmas party is one of many examples of how our current system applies the same oppression. It's not as direct, and it's not by the same people, even, but it's still happening. Donald Glover's goal here is to tell white people, who may mean well, and may be trying to help oppressed black people, that what they're doing is further pushing them back into the system from which they started. Fredrick Douglass and Donald Glover are calling for a similar action, just at different times. If I may quote a character from the show who may or may not be Donald Glover's self-insert, "We were treating slavery as if it were a mystery buried in the past. But for them, slavery is not past, is not a historical curiosity. It is an unavoidable ghost that haunts in a way we can't see."